This is a 6-minute TikTok, so you can go wash your dishes or fold your laundry, and I'll teach you something about television. In the academic study of television, we typically recognize 4 different kinds of episode format structures throughout the history of scripted American TV. Anthology, episodic, serialized, and cumulative narrative structure. An anthology show is a show in which all the episodes are different. Each of the episodes has different characters, different settings, different themes, storylines, etc. Today, anthology series are relatively rare, but a good example of one on TV right now is, of course, Black Mirror. But probably the most famous anthology series of all time is The Twilight Zone. My students picked the William Shatner episode to watch this year. And I am telling you right now, that motherfucker... In the era of Ryan Murphy, it's common to have what are called anthology seasons of a show, in which instead of changing every single episode, it changes based on the season. Traditionally, that is not what an anthology series is, but it's a word that they like to use in order to qualify for the miniseries category at the Emmys. Episodic shows are shows in which you have a central premise for the entire series, but every single episode is fairly self-contained, and this will be important later on. Of course, the most striking examples of episodic structure today are The Simpsons and South Park. Bart will be a kid forever, and Kenny is somehow going to come back from the dead every episode. But even a lot of episodes of television shows in the 80s and 90s were fairly episodic.
Who are you?
Salute Your Shorts is a favorite example of mine. They will be at summer camp forever, and we were all traumatized by Zeke the Plumber. Serialized shows are ones in which the story continues week to week to week. You have to continuously tune in. Of course, soap operas, first in radio and then in television, really pioneered the serialized form of storytelling. But now, of course, we see it in more traditional prestige quality shows that are all the rage in the 20-teens and 2020s.
It's time for another world.
You can't watch Another World.
And why not?
Because you watched it yesterday.
That's exactly why I have to watch it today, Dorothy, to find out what happens. That's why they always say stay tuned for the continuing story of Another World.
Too bad, Blanche. Today it's my turn to choose, and we are not watching Another World.
So if you really want to piss off a bro who only watches highbrow television, just say, actually, I don't watch soap operas, whenever they tell you about how amazing Breaking Bad is or Game of Thrones. And finally, you have the cumulative form, which is really a combination of episodic and serialized. Each episode has a fairly self-contained A story, whereas the B story tends to be installments in a season-long arc. A great example of this, of course, is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where every episode is going to have an individual monster, but over the course of the season, there's going to be some big bad. My favorite is Glory, the god.
You sure about that last part?
If you ask writers, of course there are certain attractive artistic reasons why they might choose one of these story types over another. But historically speaking, it is a business decision based on the demands of the industry and how we as a population watch television. And streaming is changing it in a big way. For many years, the networks did not own the shows that they produced. And so the people who were producing them would often produce them at a deficit, hoping to make it to syndication, typically to get 100 episodes in order to make it to reruns where they would actually really make money on their shows. Which should help you understand a little bit of the history behind why residuals are so important in American media. So if you were a studio hoping to make it to reruns, you'd want to have a really good formula where people could sort of drop in and watch any episode out of order. Then that way, when it plays 16 times on TBS, TNT, or WGN Superstation, people aren't confused about what's happening in the story because it's well self-contained. And that is why for a number of years, episodic structure was preferred. You'd get a number of episodes that you could play in reruns and make some of the money back that you lost to the networks. But at the same time, people didn't need to stick around episode to episode to episode in order to understand what was going on in the story. Streaming, however, created a new imperative. We wanted people to sit in their seat for as long as possible and watch the next episode and the next episode and the next episode. So episodic structure doesn't tend to be as good for streamers in original programming because they really want people to stick around and watch the next episode, which they're going to do if the storyline continually progresses and is never really self-satisfied in any one particular episode. It's really cool that you can actually see the movement from one imperative to the other in the industry's history by looking at two shows. The Good Wife, and Scandal. At the very beginning, both of these shows are fairly episodic. You have a character in The Good Wife who is a defense attorney or a political fixer in Scandal. And every single episode, there's going to be some major issue that they're trying to solve, some big court case or something that Olivia Pope is trying to fix. By the end of the episode, everything kind of returns back to normal. But because the networks now own their content and are really controlling the second distribution of it, now there's starting to be more of a serialized demand. So both of these shows really shift high into a more cumulative structure with a continuing major storyline happening over the course of a season or even the series, way more than at the very beginning. Like and follow, and the more you'll know.